Hi and welcome to today's tutorial. Today we'll be creating these beautiful blueberries using gouache. I'm using Winsor and Newton professional gouache, but you can still use any other gouache that you have and create a similar effect if not the same. So the first step is going to be drawing this. So I'm going to speed up my video a little bit and then just create these cute blueberries using basic shapes, which is your circle. So I'm also creating like the eye of it, but you don't really need to create all the details in the beginning. Feel free to draw any style that you want to, and then we'll mix our colors and start painting. I'm using 300 GSM watercolor sheets. Gouache works best with that, so you can either create it on white or you can also create it on black sheet. So the first step that I'm going to do is to mix a nice lemon yellow or a mid yellow, I would say, so something like a cadmium or a mango yellow for my background. So there are two ways of using gouache. You can use it in the format that I'm using right now, which is more like a watercolor thing, but it's at the same time not extremely watery. It is not very light, it's medium, I would say, but it's not very creamy consistency, which you would have seen in a lot of other videos. So this kind of style helps you to get a very interesting surface for your background. So I really enjoy creating this. You don't have to create multiple layers for your background, just feel free to create one layer. Just make sure that when you're mixing your color for the first time, you have enough color to fill your entire background. It's okay if you mix a little more color, it's not going to go waste. Make sure that you use the same palette. You don't have to wash your colors away. All you need to do is add a little bit of water and the paint will get activated back again. I find this technique in using gouache very interesting and very soothing. It feels very nice because it gives you a very interesting finish at the end of it. So after this entire piece dries, you will notice that the background has a very nice earthy tone to it, where some areas are dark and some areas are light. So I really enjoy doing that. So the next thing that I'm going to do is mix a little bit of white and a little bit of blue. You could use Prussian blue, cobalt blue, even ultramarine. So just feel free, mix a couple of colors together, play around with your paints and figure out how they work. So I'm mixing some green, I'm mixing some blue, and then we'll go ahead with painting our blueberries. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a layer in our blueberries. So with gouache, what you can do is add one layer, wait for it to completely dry out, and then figure out if you're happy with that color or just create another layer on top of it. So what I've done over here is I've given two colors and I'm trying to figure out which one I like, and I like the darker color a little more. So the first one that I've created, I'm just going to go over it again with the dark color once it dries. So once it dries, you don't have to press too much with your brush, because if you do, the color will activate with the base, which is still fine in this case because both are blues, but you could be a little bit more careful about that, otherwise it would just mix in too much and it may not be the same style that you want it to be. So you'll notice the background has dried out very nicely. I love the colors where in some areas it's dark and some areas it's light, so I love the play of that. Gouache as a medium is very interesting. It's very soothing. The final effect that it's created using gouache is very beautiful. So the colors that you get with gouache is not something that you can get with watercolors or acrylics. You will need to mix a little bit of white in most of them, and the consistency of the pigments, the colors, the finish is not as beautiful as this. I love the matte finish which comes along with gouache. So that is what makes it different from your acrylics. I'm now adding a watery green to the leaves. You could still make it extremely creamy. You don't really need to make it as watery as I am. You'll notice this dark green that I'm creating right now is a little more creamier than the earlier ones. So why I'm also doing this is when you're looking at this particular tutorial, You could have different kinds of gouache with you. You may have made mistakes like this earlier. You may have tried different things and you would have thought these are mistakes, but these are just different styles in which you can create something. You can always create a second layer on top, third layer on top. Some of the gouache which you buy, it could be student range, which means it's not very translucent. It could still create like a very not a very opaque layer. So all you need to do in that case is create another layer of color on top of it once it dries. Now that the leaves are done, I'm going to now start adding details to make this come to life. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a slightly darker blue. So what I'm doing is creating the eye of it on each section. So it's okay if you don't know where your drawings are. You can see that, you know, the pencil marks are seen a little bit through mine. If you've used a very creamy texture for the base, then your pencil marks will not be seen. Don't worry about it. Just use your brush, paint again over them, or you could also use color pencil or a pencil again to draw over it, but I do not recommend that. I think you can still handle this. If not, just practice in another sheet of paper and then create on this. So what I'm doing right now over here is a very watery white layer, just creating a small highlight on each of the blueberries over here. If you don't want your white highlights to stand out too much, just add a little bit of blue next to them and you'll notice that the blend is a little more nicer. You don't really need to do any gradation over here. You can just have them all flat. It looks really nice that way. So what I'm doing right now is also going to create a darker green. So in case your palette has less number of colors, you can just mix a little bit of blue with the green to get a nice dark green. And I'm going to use that to now add the veins into the leaves, and you'll see how each thing now starts looking much nicer. The small detailing in gouache is what is a lot of fun to create. Experimenting with colors is very interesting. So here what I'm trying to do is creating a lighter version of the green. So whenever you want to do that, just mix a little bit of white and you will notice that it will become a little light than what is there, and you will get a good consistency of color. Second is it gets a little creamier, so that way when you're layering one color on top of another, it will be able to stand out quite well. Otherwise sometimes it'll just blend in through and you're not really going to get a nice shade that you want. So here I'm making the darker green slightly lighter because I think it's too dark and it's standing out too much, so I've just mixed a little bit of white with it to create that. Here is another technique that you can use, where on top of your background you can create another layer on top, and you will notice that it does not really mix much with the background unless you're going to move your brush over that area back and forth too much. In this case that area is really tiny, which is why it's not going to affect it too much, and the layers come on top of each other perfectly. So try to avoid creating a background in the end, because you may or may not be able to create a really nice one. Sometimes it merges and you'll not get very clean finishes of your objects. So I've made the highlights also much brighter and I like how it looks. Now inside the eye, I'm just creating little areas or little dots of slightly darker blue where I have mixed a dot of black with it. Here is how the close-up one looks. Since it's not a very creamy consistency that I have used, you can see that it's not too heavy on the eye. It is still a little translucent in some places. I enjoy creating gouache like that. I love using different styles of it. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you're new over here, do consider subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram, and whenever you recreate this, you can tag me so I can see it. Thank you. See you for the next tutorial.